Note 249. Taking into account Chapter 6, only Tom's creatures, born out of the absence of light, shaped with his bare hands, seem able to exist in that place, though all of them are as mutable as letters, as permanent as fame, a strange little bestiary lamenting nothing, instructing no one, revealing the outline of lives really only visible to the imagination. And tonight, as I copied this scene down, I began to feel very bad. Maybe because Tom's antics only temporarily transformed that place into something other than itself, though even that transformation is not without its own peculiar horror. For no matter how many creatures he flings on the wall of his tent, no matter how large or how real they may appear, they still all perish in a flood of darkness. No Noah's Ark, nothing safe, no way to survive, which may have had something to do with my outburst at the shop today. I was in some weird kind of jittery daze. Everyone was there. Thumper, my boss, the usual visitants, along with some depraved biker who was in the middle of getting an octopus carved into his deltoid. He kept blathering on about the permanence of ink, which I guess really got to me because I started howling, and loud too, real loud, spit sputtering off my lips, snot shooting out of my nose. Permanent? I shouted. Are you fucking loopy, man? Everyone was shocked. The biker could have taught me a thing or two about the impermanence, or at least the destructibility of flesh, in this case my flesh, but he was also shocked. Thumper came to my rescue, quickly escorting me outside and ordering me to take the day off. I don't know what you're getting messed up in, Johnny, but it's fucking you up bad. Then she touched my arm, and I immediately wanted to tell her everything. Right then and there. I needed to tell her everything. Unfortunately, there was no question in my mind that she would think I was certifiable if I started rattling on about animals and hand shadows, mutable as letters, as permanent as fame, a strange oh, fuck, the hell with the rest. I choked down the words. Maybe I am certifiable. I came here instead. Which, in an odd and roundabout way, brings me to the Pekingese, the dog story I mentioned a ways back but didn't want to discuss. Well, I've changed my mind. The Pekingese belongs here, with Tom's hand shadows. It happened last December, a month before I'd ever heard of Zampano, on the tail end of what had proved to be a rather dramatic November, All Souls Day commencing with Lude's acquisition of a great deal of ecstasy, a portion of which he sold to me at bulk rate. Haas, this is our pass to paradise, Lude had told me, and of course he was right. Who cared if it was fall? It felt like spring. Lude led the way, zipping from club to bar, crashing Bel Air fetes, desert raves, and any after-hours open-house Malibu mansion madness we could find out about. Remarkably, no matter how zealously guarded these events were, velvet ropes as impossible to transcend as concertina wire without a hand grenade, the pills were our hand grenades. Velvet blown aside with the release of just one tab. They got us in everywhere. Even if noses were already bloody with coke, lungs black with cannabis, or throats dry with bourbon. X was still something else entirely. A spine-shivering departure from the regular banquet, offering plenty of love-simulated, bliss-bloated diversions. And so it happened that month, Novem 9 and all mine November, Lude disappeared into his own bower of Bentdom, while I wandered off and promptly found my own. Not too long afterwards, Lude made a great show of sharing in me his official and most prodigious tally for that month, something which, for some reason, I felt compelled to write down. Lude's list. November 1st. Monique, 36. On her washing machine. She came during the rinse cycle. He came during the spin cycle. Dryer broken. November 3rd. Morning, Tonya, 23. Hispanic, twice. Evening, Nina, 34. Leather choker, thigh-high boots. November 4th. Sparkle, 32. In a gazebo above the party. November 5th. Kelly, 29. Dancer. In some host's sauna. November 6th, Gina, 22, said please before making the weirdest requests. November 8th, Jennifer, 20, naked at midnight on the diving platform at USC. November 9th, Caroline, 21, Swedish, on her Nordic trek. Later, some guy dating Monique. 1st of November, caught up with Lude. Turned out he only wanted some meat. 10th of November, Susan, 19, surprised him with a golden shower. He surprised her with a raincoat. 11th of November, evening, Brooke, 25, midnight, Marin, 22, poured champagne all over the bed and told him to sleep in the wet spot. November 12th, noon, Allison, 24 to 28, evening, unknown, 23, did it in wetsuits, neoprene smeared with Astroglide. She kept calling him O'Neill. November 13th, Holly, 24 to 34, Vietnamese. November 14th, Dawn, 19, Leslie, 19, Melissa, 19, from San Diego. They went to the pleasure chest together and bought a vibrating dildo for the first time. November 19th, Cindy, 20, waitress. I get bored when I can't use my mouth. November 20th, Erin, 21, Jewish, in a changing stall at the Gap. November 21st, Betsy, 36, after sex wanted a pearl necklace. Lude told her he was broke. November 22nd, Michelle, 20, Catholic, informed him that all anal sex requires is Vaseline and a pillow. She had both. November 25th, Stephanie, 18, black. November 27th, Alicia, 23, on top of her stereo speakers, big woofers, apparently very intense, plenty of woofing. November 28th, Thanksgiving, Dana, 28, navel pierced, nipples pierced, clitoral hood pierced, danced for Lude on her bed, then masturbated until she came. An hour later, sex. He couldn't come for the second time. She called a girlfriend. They 69'd and then played Russian blowjob, a variation on Russian roulette. Lude was the gun. They took turns, 30 seconds at a time. He timed. Dana's girlfriend lost, or won, depending on your tastes. Note YN. 100 tabs of X, 12 AA batteries, half a dozen tubes of KY jelly, 4 boxes of condoms, ribbed and ultra-thin, all with nonoxynol 9, 3 loads of laundry, 2 wetsuits, and 1 bottle of champagne. Quite a month. Note, this section also elicited several emails. Lude was such a jerk and a shitty fuck. You can tell him that. Clarissa, April 13th, 1999. Lude was so much fun. Give him my new number, 323 blank blank. Do you know what happened to him? Did he leave LA? And what about Johnny? What about all that crazy stuff in the introduction about guns and blood? I mean, if it wasn't his blood, whose was it? Natalie, May 30th, 1999. Hey kids, It Takes Two to Tango. Bethany, June 6th, 1999. Editors. Endnote YN. Though clearly not as epic as Lude's, I too had my encounters that November. 3. Gabriella was the first. Her body was covered by a terrible birthmark which ran from her collarbone across one breast, over her belly and down both her legs. You could see traces of it on her wrists and ankles, but you couldn't feel it. It was textureless, purely a visual shift. At first she turned out the lights, but after a while it didn't matter. She was gorgeous and gentle, and I was sad to see her go. She left for Milan the following morning. Barbara came next. She'd been spending a lot of time at the Playboy Mansion. Said she didn't want to be a centerfold, but liked the atmosphere there. When we got on her bed, she tore my shirt open. I could hear the buttons skitter across her floor. By midnight, she was saying she loved me. She said it so many times, I stopped counting. By morning, despite numerous hints, she couldn't remember my name. And then I hooked up with Clara English. For just one night, but at least it had started off well. Plenty of drinks, the buzz, happy thrum of our newly ingested X-ray vision, lap dances for both of us at Crazy Girls, and then back to her place for a whole lot of fucking. Only there wasn't that much fucking before there were a whole lot more hesitations and even tears set off by a series of interior tics I couldn't see. My fault for asking too, see. I shouldn't have been curious. Should have left the blinders on. Probably could have made it through the tears, but I didn't. I pulled out the old question mark, QM, and Clara didn't even think to answer with a joke. She didn't even conjure up some ridiculous story. She just took one sentence to tell me about the rape. That stopped the tears. Replaced now by well-practiced meanness. I guess I can't blame her. Who knew how I was going to respond to that kind of confession, though she didn't exactly give me the chance to respond. Suddenly, she hated me for knowing, even though she'd been the one to tell me. Though I had asked. When I called her the next day, she said she was finished fucking around with guys who belonged in a zoo. She hung up before I could ask her if she saw me with the cats or the birds. I guess I still think about her. Fixed smile, those removed gestures, that terrified gaze whenever it wasn't lost to something dull, angry, and broken. An image that invariably returns me to the same question. Can Clara English ever recover, or is she permanently wounded, damned to stagger under years devoid of meaning and love until finally the day comes when she stumbles and is swept away? I haven't seen her since. Maybe she's already been swept away. Though now when I look at Lude's list, I don't see what I wrote down back then. I pencil in additional thoughts. They're made up, of course, all of them born out of Clara's memory. Strange. Back then, November had seemed like nothing but fun. The drugs robbing it of any consequence. The sex erasing all motives. Now, however, thorns have surfaced. Sharp thorns. My blissful bower has fallen, overrun by weeds and deadly vines. So is Lude's, spiked with hurt, heavy with poisonous bloom. Lude's list revisited. Monique, husband recently left her. Tonya, an ex and a restraining order. Nina, silence. Sparkle, rage. Kelly, when she was only 11, her mother had forced her to perform oral sex on her. Gina, hiding from a stalker, her fourth. Caroline grew up in a commune, had her first abortion when she was 12. Susan said, "Who cares?" 24 telling times, hole in the roof of her mouth from too much cocaine. Brooke, numb. Marin, uncle would come over and finger her. Allison, father killed when she was 18. Leslie, raped by gym coach when she was 14. Dawn, date raped last year. Melissa, ex-boyfriend used to hit her. She finally had to get a nose job. Erin walked in on her mother screwing her boyfriend. Betsy, a reduction left jagged scars running around her nipples and through both breasts. A shame before, a shame now. Michelle, engaged. Alicia, lost her virginity to her father. Dana, prostitute. As for my list, my Gabriella and Barbara, to say nothing of Amber and Christina, Lucy, Kyrie, Tatiana, the Australian gal, Ashley, Haley, and, I suppose, others. Yes, there have been others. Who's to say? Scratch in your own guesses. No doubt your postals will be happier than mine. Though if they are, you clearly don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Then again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you have got it right. I mean, if you've lasted this far, maybe you do know what I'm talking about. Maybe even better than me. People frequently comment on the emptiness in one-night stands, but emptiness here has always been just another word for darkness. Blind encounters writing sonnets no one can ever read. Desire and pain communicated in the vague language of sex. None of which made sense to me until much later, when I realized everything I thought I'd retained of my encounters added up to so very little, hardly enduring, just shadows of love outlining nothing at all. Which I guess finally brings me to the story I've been meaning to tell all along, one that still haunts me today, about the wounded, and where I still fear they finally end up. The story of my Pekingese. By the time December came around, I'd run out of E and energy. For at least a week I was hungover with no sense of what lay ahead, plenty of untraceable guilt and a mounting sense of despair. One thing was sure, though. I needed rest. Lou didn't care. A 10 p.m. call, and an hour later he was dragging me to an opium den, into the harangue of voices and amplified rhythms, all of it mixing, on ice, with a combination of cheap bourbon and better bourbon, though surprisingly little talk or smiles. Feast to famine, Or was it the other way around? Until towards the end of the night, Lude, noticing my isolation but secure in his own AM plans, pointed across the room. "I think she's a porn star," he yelled at me, though the music turned his yell into a whisper. I glanced over at the bar and immediately knew who he was talking about. There were plenty of girls milling around, ordering cosmopolitans and beers, but she stood out, literally, from all the rest. Not height-wise, mind you. She couldn't have been more than 5'5". A petite figure, platinum hair, way too much eyeliner, nails as long as kitchen knives, and lips stuffed with God knows how many layers of tissue collected from the ass of some cadaver. But her tits, they were what told the whole story. Enormous, and that's an understatement. We're talking quadruple D, entire seas sacrificed to fill those saline sacs. Red Sea on the left, Dead Sea on the right. Given the right storm, they could probably take out coastal townships with no guarantees for inland villages either. "Go talk to her," Lude urged me. "What do I say?" I yelled/whispered, bewildered. "Ask her how big they are." I did go up and talk to her, and we talked for a while, though never about her tits, which constantly drew my eyes into their orbit no matter how hard I tried to resist. Moon and sea tied together. Turned out she liked to listen to country music or Pantera, depending on her mood, which at that moment was completely unreadable. Her bloodshot eyes flashing out at me from beneath all that liner. Sad, drunk, dry, or just permanently red. After a good 20 minutes of talk interpolated with countless conversation ends, huge uncomfortable gaps where I always expected her to cough and excuse herself, which for whatever reason she never did, waiting for me to continue our conversation. Could anyone call that a conversation? "What kind of music do you like?" "Country." Long pause. "Really? Country? Long pause. "And Pantera." "Country and Pantera, really? On and on like that until finally, after 20 minutes, the club started closing down and bouncers began herding people towards the exits. And we walked out together. She'd come with a girlfriend who she waved goodbye to outside, ignoring me, though after the wave, suddenly returning to me, asking me to escort her to her truck. As we waited for the light to change, she told me her name was Johnny, though some people called her Sled, though her real name was Rachel. This is a simple telling of a much more difficult series of questions, the answers to which, in retrospect, were more than likely all made up. Then as the light changed and we crossed to the east side of Vine, we found on the corner a black, bug-eyed Pekingese without tags. It was dirty, scared, and obviously without owner, snot pouring out of its pug nose, every part of it trembling as it cowered on that grimy sidewalk, motionless. Finally, after how many hours, how many days, at a loss where to go. All directions leading to the same place anyway, its own end. "Oh, my poor baby," Johnny cooed, those cold and indifferent spaces in our talk suddenly full of affection and concern, though the notes seemed wrong, not dissonant or flat or played at an improper tempo, just wrong, the melody somehow robbed of itself, meaning not another melody either, just something else. At least that's how it sounds now. Back then, I hardly noticed. Still, I was the one who picked up the frightened thing, cradling its small head in the crook of my arms, wiping some of the snot off the sleeve of my buttonless corduroy coat, deciding as I did this, making a mess of myself, to take it home with me. To hell with the cramped space. I wasn't going to let this animal die, not after it had snotted on my coat and sighed in my arms. But Johnny wanted the poor thing. "What kind of place do you have?" she asked. "A studio," I replied. "No way," she said, growing increasingly more emphatic and insistent, even if all this was spoken in that strange melody. Not exactly atonal, I don't know, just wrong. So despite my instincts, I relented. After all, she had a home in the valley, a yard, the kind of place dogs are meant to have. A happy pet land, she called it, and really, considering the hole I inhabited, there was no argument. I handed Johnny the poor Pekingese, and together we placed it in the truck. "Call me Mama to all strays," she said, and gave me a weird smile. Johnny ended up giving me a lift back to my place. Oddly enough, when we pulled up in front of my building, I didn't ask her in. She seemed grateful, but I hadn't ducked the invitation on her behalf. Something seemed wrong, very wrong. Maybe it was the vacancy I had begun to taste, brought on by November. Novem, ovum, nine, and all mine. Or maybe it was her, The saltful breasts, the deformed mouth, the fresco of makeup, her entire figure so perfectly grotesque, and all at the age of 24, or so she had told me, though she probably was closer to 6,000 years old. Something about her frightened me. The knotted fingers, that blank stare, permanently fixed on some strange slate bare continent lost deep beneath ancient seas, her seas, dark, red, dead. Maybe not. Maybe it was that Pekingese pup, hungry and abandoned, suddenly rescued, suddenly with hope. A projection of myself, my own place in the way of straydom, maybe. Who knows the real answer? But I'll tell you this, I sure as hell wasn't thinking then about Johnny's tits or lips or the positions, the absurd positions we could have made together. I was thinking only about the Pekingese, its safety, its future. The Pekingese and me, a contract of concern. I rubbed the top of its ears, stroked its back, and then I climbed out of the truck and said goodbye. As Johnny pulled away, she smiled again, that weird, all-wrong smile. For a moment, I watched her taillights trail down the street, still feeling uncertain, but a little relieved, until as I turned to go inside, I heard the thump. The one I remember even now, so clearly, an eerie and awful sound. Not too loud. Slightly hollow, in fact, amounting to just that. A thump. Like that. Thump. I looked down the street. Her truck was gone, but behind it, in its wake, something dark rolled into the light of a street lamp. Something Johnny had thrown out her window as she passed the parked cars. I jogged down the block, feeling more than a little uneasy, until as I approached that clump of something on the side of the road, I discovered, much to my dismay, all my uneasiness confirmed. To this day, I don't know why she did it. My abandoned Pekingese, found on vine, bug-eyed with snot pouring out of its pug nose, re-found not too far from my front door that very same night, lying next to a car with half its head caved in, an eye broken and oozing vitreous jelly, tongue caught and partially severed in its snapped jaws. She must have thrown it with tremendous force, too. In truth, an almost unimaginable amount of force. I tried to picture those claw-like hands grabbing this poor creature by the neck and hurling it out her window. Had she even looked at what she held? Had she even glanced back? Later in the week, Lude told me he'd been wrong. She wasn't a porn star. She was someone else. Someone he didn't know. Did I know? I don't know why I didn't tell him. Probably because his real question was, had I fucked her, and what could have been further from the truth? Me staring down at that lifeless dog, not a speck of blood, mind you, just a shadow looking a lot like some kind of a charcoal drawing, featureless and still, floating in a pool of yellow lamplight. I couldn't even say anything, not a cry, a shout, or a word. I couldn't feel anything either, shock alone possessing me, depriving me of any emotional meaning, finally leaving me in a mad debate over what to do with the body. Bury it, take it to the pound, throw the thing in a garbage can. I couldn't decide anything. So I just crouched there, my knees burning, finally filling with enough of that distant pain that tells all of us, especially in our sleep, that the time has come to move. But I wanted to give this dog a name first, and lists skipped through my mind, endless lists, which in the end ran out. There was no name. I was too late, and so I just stood up and left. Call me an asshole, and fuck you too. My Pekingese friend was gone. Ant food now. At the very least, I reasoned, the body was close enough to the curb. The street sweeper would get it in the morning. Another mother to all strays. End note 249. Day 2, 1904. Outside tent, smoking another joint. Enough. I've had enough. Man, this is just not fair. Day 2, 2003. Outside tent. Radio, Navidson. Static. We hear something. Noise. Going. Noise. Turret. Tom. Good luck, bro. Silence. Day 2, 21:54. Outside tent. Radio, Karen. I'm scared, Tom. Tom. What's the matter? Are the kids all right? Radio, Karen. No, they're okay. I think they're okay. Daisy stays in her room. Chad prefers being outside. Who can argue with that? It's something else. Tom. What? Radio, Karen. All my feng shui. Oh Christ, this whole thing doesn't make any sense. How are Navy and Billy doing? Have they found anything? When are they coming back? Tom. They heard someone crying. I didn't get it all because the reception was so poor. From what I can gather, they're fine. Radio, Karen. Well, I'm not. I don't like being here alone, Tom. In fact, I'm fucking fed up with being alone. She starts crying. I don't like being scared all the time, wondering if he's going to be all right, then wondering if I'm going to be all right if he's not, knowing I won't be. I'm so tired of being frightened like this. I've had enough, Tom. I really have. After this, I'm leaving. I'm taking the kids and I'm going. This wasn't necessary. It could have been avoided. We didn't need to go through all this. Tom, gently. Karen, wait a minute. Just back up for a second. First, tell me what you were saying about your feng shui stuff. Radio, Karen. Pause. The objects. I put all these objects around the house. You remember, to improve the energy or some such shit. Tom. Sure. Crystals and bullfrogs. Goldfish and dragons. Radio, Karen. Tom, they're all gone. Tom. What do you mean? Radio, Karen, crying harder. They disappeared. Tom. Hey, Karen, come on. Did you ask Daisy and Chad? Maybe they took them. Radio, Karen. Tom, they're the ones who told me. They wanted to know why I'd gotten rid of it all. Day 2, 22:19. Outside tent. Radio, Navidson. How's Karen? Static. Tom. Not so good, Navy. She's pretty scared. You should get back here. Radio, Navidson. What? Static. 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 Hear you. Tom. Navy. Navy. Static. Day 2, 23:07. Outside tent. This is such bullshit. You hear me, Mr. Monster? Bullshit. What kind of house do you got here anyway? No lights, no central heating, not even any plumbing. I've been shitting in a corner and pissing on a wall for 2 days, getting louder. Doesn't that irk you a little, Mr. Monster? I've been shitting in your corner. I've been pissing on your wall. Then softer. Of course, the piss is dried up and the crap just vanishes. You gobble it all up, don't you? Turtles. Shit, doesn't matter to you. Loud again. Indiscriminate bastard. Doesn't it make you sick? It makes me sick. Makes me want to retch. Long series of echoes. Day 3, 49 after midnight. Outside tent, reaching into his Ziploc bag for the last joint. And all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. Not even you, Mr. Monster. Just Tom, poor old Tom, who was doing plenty of stirring around this house until finally he went stir crazy, wishing there was a creature, any creature, even a mouse. Day 3, 54 after midnight. Radio, Navidson. Bang. We're in shit now. Static. Tom. Navy, what's happening? I can barely hear you. Radio, Navidson. Jed's been shot. He's Static. Tom. Shot? By who? Radio. Pop, pop, pop. Reston. I can't see a fucking thing. Crack, 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 crack. Reston. Oh, shit. Crack, bang, crack, 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 crack. Tom. What the hell was that? Radio Navidson. Tom. Static. Static. I'm gonna. Static. 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 Wax. We have to. Shit. Static. Tom. I'm losing you, Navy. Radio Navidson. Static. Tom. Navy, do you read me? Over. Day 3, 1:28, outside tent. Radio Navidson. Static. It's probably going to take us a good 8 hours to make it back to the stairs. Tom, I need you to meet me at the bottom. Static. We need help. We can't carry them up ourselves. Also, you're static. 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 E2. Static. A doctor. Static. Static. Day 3, 7:39. Outside tent. Tom looks down the spiral staircase, ignites a light stick and drops it. Are you down there, Mr. Monster? Below, the light stick flickers and dies. Tom recoils. No way, not gonna happen, Navy. I've been alone in this shithole for almost 3 days, and now you want me to go down there alone. No way. Tom descends a few steps, then quickly retreats. No can do. Tom tries again, makes it down to the first flight. There, that's not so bad. Fuck you, Mr. Monster. Yeah, fuck you. Then, as Tom starts down the second flight, the stairs suddenly stretch and drop 10 feet. Tom looks up and sees the circular shape of the stairwell bend into an ellipse before snapping back to a circle again. Tom's breathing gets noticeably more rapid. You are here, aren't you, Mr. Monster? A pause, and then out of nowhere comes that growl, more like a roar, almost deafening, as if it originated right next to Tom. Tom panics and sprints back up the stairs. The shot from the camcorder instantly becomes an incoherent blur of walls, banisters, and the dim light thrown by the halogen. A minute later, Tom reaches the top. Day 3, 7:53, outside tent. Tom. Karen. Radio Karen. Are you all right? Tom. I'm coming in. A short analysis of Tom's story. How does one approach this quirky sequence? What does it reveal about Tom? What does it say about the Navidson record? For one thing, Navidson edited this segment months later. No doubt, what would soon take place deeply influenced the way he treated the material. As Nietzsche wrote, "It is our future that lays down the law of our today." All throughout Tom's story, Navidson tenderly focuses on Tom's mirth and his ability to play in the halls of hell, those dolorous mansions of isolation, fear, and doubt. He captures his brother trying to help Karen and him with their foundering relationship, and he reveals Tom's surprising strength in the face of such utter darkness and cold. There is nothing hasty about Tom's story. Navidson has clearly put an enormous amount of work into these few minutes. Despite obvious technological limitations, the cuts are clean and sound beautifully balanced, with the rhythm and order of every shot only serving to intensify even the most ordinary moment. This is a labor of love, a set-piece sibling to Karen's short film on Navidson. Perhaps because Tom's antics are so amusing and so completely permeated with warmth, we could easily miss how hand shadows, an abundance of bad jokes, and the birth of Mr. Monster ultimately come to mean sorrow. If sorrow is deep regret over someone loved, there is nothing but regret here. As if Navidson, with his great eye, had for the first time seen what, over the years, he never should have missed. Or should have missed all along.